Hi, my name is Ben Watanabe, and this is the Track Bar, Destin Fuel's weekly NASCAR show. I am not joined this week by Mike Cole. Much like Ty Majeski, who's making his Xfinity Series debut after a long career of playing in iRacing, Pat has been practicing by himself in front of his computer, pretending that he's been on the track bar for weeks.
Every day I've been standing in front of the wall talking.
Yep, but now he finally gets his chance. So we are live on Facebook. Feel free to tell us how bad he's doing. First off, how you doing, Pat?
Probably pretty bad.
All right.
Tell me.
After that welcome in, I'm sure that it can only get better from here. Had a lot of stuff go down last weekend. Some of it new, some of it not so new. One thing that was not new was Chase Elliott was still not winning. He finished second for the third time in 3 races at Michigan. Very consistent for a young guy. He still hasn't gotten a win, however. And this is a guy that, coming into last season as a rookie, NASCAR was pinning a lot of their hopes on this guy. And at the time, it was just kind of at a youth movement. But now they need more than ever a guy to emerge as that star, with Dale Earnhardt Jr. announcing his retirement. As a guy who... can I call you a casual to a growing NASCAR fan?
I think that's fair.
What do you see out of Chase Elliott as far as the star power, star potential of him, and how quickly NASCAR needs him to become more than just maybe the next guy, to a guy that's becoming a contender?
I think we'll really see next year once Dale Jr. is out of there, but right now, I don't think he has to win immediately because he's still really, really young. And, I mean, if you look at the list of people who have won in the first season, it's some of the big names in the sport like Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, and even his dad, Bill Elliott. But, again, you're taking that out of context because he still had a bunch of top 10s, a bunch of top 5s, finished in second last year. So he's been running strong. I think... like you said, the pressure last year was just a bit much. So that said, he's not doing too bad, and thankfully people aren't really putting him under a microscope yet.
Not yet. I think that the time is going to come, though. I mean, other young guys who have won, obviously Ryan Blaney's won, Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson's won a couple times now. As Ricky Stenhouse, who's not quite as young, but he was also once that young guy who was supposed to start winning some races, and he didn't, and he kind of fell off the radar a little bit. I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen with Elliott, but there's a lot of younger guys that are getting better every single day, and Larson and Blaney are starting to separate themselves from him in the pack a little bit, and now we've got Daniel Suarez, Eric Jones, and maybe coming up guys like Alex Bowman next year who are going to be closing the gap. If he's going to be more than just a bridesmaid that NASCAR thinks is cool to put into commercials, he's going to have to actually start winning some races.
Yeah, I think what he has going for him is, even though those guys are kind of getting more notoriety right now, they're getting their wins in, he doesn't seem to let it get to him mentally.
Yeah, he's tough.
So he can keep a level head, which should play well for him.
Yeah, sometimes, though, I think he's a little too level-headed. Sometimes, it gets down to the last 10, 15 laps. You got to put that pedal to the floor a little
absolutely.
bit. Yeah. So why is it important that NASCAR finds another star? Because they're in the process of losing all of their stars.
Yeah, pretty much.
Their biggest star, Dale Earnhardt Jr., but obviously that comes on the heels of Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart and a whole bunch of guys. Carl Edwards this offseason calling it quits. The number 88, which I was not prepared to talk about. Again, this is now the third straight week of the show. We've been talking about it, although it makes sense. We talk about the biggest star in the sport. But there was a report by the Associated Press that connected a lot of names to Dale Earnhardt Jr. and who might fill that 88. It seems like the leader in the clubhouse right now is Matt Kenseth. He's got a year remaining on his deal with, he's nearing the end of his deal with Joe Gibbs Racing, and Brad Keselowski, who's in a contract year with Team Penske. It seems like if they can't work it out with Kenseth, things get interesting. I think Keselowski would be a very, very interesting addition, especially since, I mean, Kenseth is having some struggles here in Toyota, but Keselowski is still going strong. He is Team Penske. He's been not only their best driver, he's also their recruiter. He went out and, recruited essentially Joey Logano. He's been huge in developing Ryan Blaney. To me, the Keselowski rumor came out of nowhere, but when you look at it, there are some elements that make it seem not so far-fetched. Yeah,
it seemed to me that, honestly, the Keselowski seems like a more reasonable option than Kenseth just because of where Hendrick is right now, because they have Jimmy Johnson, who's coming on the tail end of his career. He just signed an extension, but he's not going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. You got Chase Elliott, who's coming up, who's a young guy, so you don't want to have somebody too inexperienced to join him, but you don't want to have somebody too old so that they follow Johnson out the door. And Keselowski's right in that middle area, whereas Kenseth is a bit more on the older side. And he has connections to Hendrick. He has connections to Dale Jr. He drove for JR Motorsports.
Yep, that's how he got into the sport.
Yeah, it does seem like a likely option, and we'll have to see how it plays out.
I think for a while, maybe last season, a lot of people were assuming that 88 was just waiting for Alex Bowman, the way that I think some people kind of assume that the 48 is waiting for William Byron. I think they're way too green, though, especially with the accelerated timeline that Dale Jr.'s impending retirement has created. I think now the timeline's perfect with Jimmy Johnson signing that extension for Byron to eventually move in there. I agree with you. I think Keselowski makes a lot more sense, especially when you're talking about, bringing in Kenseth. You've got Kenseth and then Jimmy Johnson. Your two of your top drivers would be in their 40s. Although Kenseth would slide really well into that AARP car that Jeff Gordon was driving towards the end of his career. So there's a lot of synergy there. Synergy, it's a good word. Buzzwords. So we usually talk a lot about guys turning left. There's a lot of turning left. I've heard that joke before whenever I tell people that I like NASCAR, but it's very original. But this week they're turning right and left and right and left and right again, headed to Sonoma Raceway and the road course. I think road courses are very interesting in NASCAR.
I agree. You know me. I like F1. I like sports cars, so I'm all about road racing. And just something about NASCAR road races that are always a bit unpredictable, just because stock cars aren't meant to go on road courses, really.
No, it's a complete. It's like having someone put on football pads and then tell them to go like dance ballet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You have a safety net to the left of you, harnesses around you, no mirrors. Like, you can't see anything. Right. It's just a recipe for disaster, and I love it.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. I don't think it should become too frequent. I like the fact that they've added the one at the Roval or whatever it's called in Charlotte for next year. But the thing that I think is really interesting about road courses is that even more so than at like a short course to a super speedway, there's obviously drivers who are really good at one and not so much at the other. But the road courses, you see a lot of guys who are like great at speedways, super speedways, short track ovals. They get to the road course and they have no idea what they're doing. I think it's such a gigantic discrepancy between drivers who can wrestle that thing and drivers who are just like, you know what, I'm just going to hang back here. I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I agree. And it's because I think like it's one of those things where it's not just a different skill set in the sense that you have to like brake, downshift, turn right. But like even when you're racing somebody, it's a different mindset because you're not trying to set up passes going around an oval. You're trying to think, okay, if I'm this close to him now, where can I get a move on him, say 3 turns away or 4 turns away?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the difference. So the oval, you have 4 turns and essentially 4 passing opportunities. Mm-hmm. At a road course, you could have 8 turns and only 2 of those are actual passing opportunities.
You got to know where your spots are on each lap.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of curious to see who's going to emerge as the next kind of road course guy here in NASCAR. Because, I was looking at the best average finishes among active drivers, and there's a lot of guys who aren't really active anymore. Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, Carl Edwards, they were all pretty good. And there were people who came from other forms of racing. AJ Allmendinger was in champ cars and sports cars. Danica was obviously, an IndyCar. And they haven't... taken over to the extent that you might think because of their road course experience. But I think it's kind of like what you were getting at, is taking an Indy car around Road America is a lot different than trying to maneuver a gigantic, hefty stock car around Sonoma. But you actually think that there is a guy who has had some consistent success who is better positioned as far as NASCAR is related on the road courses?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you look at AJ Allmendinger, you're right. He hasn't been a standout performer by any means.
Dominant, but
exactly.
He's been very steady.
He's been very consistent at Watkins Glen, 5 top 10s, 2 top 5s in 7 races. Really struggled at Sonoma.
Yeah.
Average finish 18.5. But I think because he came from a lot more of a sports car background than open wheel, he's used to going door to door on a road course, making aggressive moves, and not having fear of bumping the other car, whereas Danica has more experience with open wheel where if you touch, one of you is going off.
Yeah.
So.
All right, we'll see what happens this weekend. To give us a little bit of a preview of what might happen, at least from a fantasy standpoint, let's go over to Dak Randall.
Thanks, guys. So you say that Sonoma and road races are tough to predict. I'm here to tell you you're wrong, because Denny Hamlin is going to win the race this weekend. I know he hasn't visited victory lane all year, but I think that ends this weekend. He finished second at Sonoma last year, and then he followed it up with a victory at Watkins Glen, the other road course. So I think he has a good chance of doing that this year. Another one is Kurt Busch, who always seems to be in the top 5 or at least the top 10 at road courses. Seems to be one of the better road racers in the sport. And as far as a driver I'm going to stay away from is Ryan Blaney. I know he's been really good lately, and he's been one of the best young drivers in the sport, but he struggled mightily at Sonoma and Watkins Glen last year, so I look elsewhere this week for B-list drivers.
I think that's a good pick. I'm riding the Busch Boys heavy in my fantasy lineup this week. Also, the most consistent finisher at Sonoma in recent history is also in my lineup, but you did not mention him.
Who is it?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
All right, let's go down to 3 wide. 3 wides where it's Clint Boyer. Congratulations for that. If you're in a pay for a weekly league or whatever, just send the check to Nesson. 3 wide. We're going to tackle 3 questions that we kind of lightly touched on earlier on the show, and we're going to answer them. That's how questions work. So first off, in 3 wide, talking about Chase. And his lack of wins. Who will be the biggest NASCAR star in 5 years? I'm going to start. I'm going to go first, because the second one, I need some time to think about. I probably should have thought more about it when I proposed it. But the first one, who will be the biggest NASCAR star in 5 years? I think it will be Chase Elliott. Win or lose. I think Dale Earnhardt has shown that you can be a really, really extremely good driver. You don't necessarily have to be the best to be the most popular. I definitely think that with his youth, he's got those looks. You could put him in cereal commercials or whatever with kids, and he could be a crossover star. In 5 years, I mean, he might only have 4 or 5 wins by then, but I think as long as he's got a couple, that's enough to make him the biggest star. Not necessarily the best driver, but the biggest star.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think Bubba Wallace, obviously we haven't seen what he can do for a long time in a Cup car, but in the brief time he's been in Cup so far for the 2 races, he's shown that he can improve from race to race, take criticism, get better. He's also really active on social media. Reminds me a lot of Dale Jr. in that sense. Okay. Every race he issues Periscope things, sends out pictures from non-racing stuff, like when he's playing video games, watching TV, things like that. So he's just relatable in that sense, and I think people like a character like that. Okay,
all right. Next question. So Kyle Larson, the guy who won last weekend, was driving the Cars 3 car. Although I took my kids to go see Cars 3. It was great. It was awesome. It's not getting great reviews. Dakota, I don't think, liked it.
Dakota doesn't like anything.
I thought it was by far the best in the franchise. And if you really like racing, I think you'll really like it, because it was the first one that was really about auto racing and wasn't about small town America or something like that. But anyway, so my kids pointed out that Kyle Larson's car was not really the Lightning McQueen car, despite the paint job, because it didn't have 95 on it. So you're on notice with the 5-year-old's Kyle Larson. But what's a no-brainer TV/movie tie-in that you can't believe NASCAR hasn't already made, or that NASCAR needs to make?
I actually struggled with this one too, but then once I thought of it, I kind of am wondering why they haven't thought of it. The Grand Tour, which had his first season last year, because Amazon's based in the U.S., they're pushing that a lot in the U.S. For those of you who don't know, it's 3 people who worked on Top Gear, and then they left for various reasons, and then went over to Amazon and started a show. And it used to be like very European-centric. Even they use like the metric system, all that. Everything is tailored towards the U.S. now, so it makes no sense not to put it in front of a giant audience of race fans.
Okay. Or at least an Amazon car, right?
Yeah.
That would make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few that I've... the fact that Bush doesn't sponsor either of the Bushes doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. Jimmy John's should sponsor Jimmy Johnson. So we got to talk to Kevin Harvick about those two. For a long time, Menards didn't sponsor Paul Menard and made it really confusing.
Yeah.
But speaking of going to see kids shows, apparently there's some Disney movie coming out later this year called Coco that's about a Mexican musician?
You're on your own on
Kid?
this one.
But I mean, since obviously they have the Disney tie-in already with cars, I think that they should go with that for Daniel Suarez, since Daniel Suarez has taken NASCAR International. So that we just have fixed all the sponsorship issues that some NASCAR teams have. Again, send the check to Nesson. Third one. This is Andre's choice. Andre, what do you got for question for us this week?
All right, guys. You know what the biggest story in the sports world has been this week? Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor are going to get into the boxing ring. Which 2 NASCAR drivers would you like to see in the boxing ring?
That's a good one. I know who I got.
Go ahead.
Danica Patrick and Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Why? So that we can have a domestic violence suit that follows?
No, if you're in the ring, it's okay. Again, plus, I don't think they'd file suit against Danica after she kicked Ricky's ass.
I think if it's on national TV, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, I don't know. Or Danica and Dakota's boy, Joey Logano. Joey Logano's got the reach, but I think Danica could get in there and just kind of give him a reason to squint.
A reason to squint. I want to see the Penske guys go up against each other, Logano and Keselowski.
Really?
Just because they're both pretty awkward.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be... They both kind of make me uncomfortable. But
They could either both get really lucky and land a haymaker, or it would be just a bunch of slapping and screaming.
I tell you what I don't want to see. I don't want to see Logano and Busch round 2, because Logano Busch round 1 kind of stunk. Dakota Randall chimes in now. He wants to see Martin Truex and Joey Logano. I don't understand why. I don't get
I
it.
feel like Truex is a random one in that situation.
Because he's like this all-American dude from Colorado.
He's not from Colorado.
Or no, well, his team is. His team's in
Oh,
Colorado,
okay.
and he's always out hunting and fishing. He's like this all-American guy. I feel like he would absolutely
You just described half the
destroy.
field.
Yeah, but Martin Truex is like the ultimate epitome of that to me. I feel like Martin Truex would destroy Joey Logano.
Martin Truex,
Be a bloodbath.
born and bred in New Jersey.
Yeah, but come on.
That-
look at Martin
New Jersey.
Martin
All right,
Truex.
yeah.
So there you go.
All right.
New Jersey versus Connecticut.
New Jersey versus Connecticut. You really get
The
into the
two states
heartland
that
of
wanna be
NASCAR
New York.
fandom right there. Good job. All right. On that bad note, I think we're going to call it quits. I think that Dakota obviously called it quits, minutes ago. For Pat Magasey, Dakota Randall, my name is Ben Watson. I'll be joining us next week on The Track Bar.